Hello again, everybody. It's Steve Scott here, and we are going to have another edition of our online coaching program called Kaizen. Whatever format you're watching me on, this will be on my Welcome at Steve Scott YouTube channel, and I will be emailing it to everyone in the Kaizen program as well, or you may see it on some other format that's on the internet. Today's subject is transitions, transitioning from one move to the next. We often think of transitions in the very obvious case where you throw someone or take them down from a standing position to ground fighting. But transitions are a very useful concept, a very useful tool, and they should be explored. They're just not one phase of grappling, as I just said, from throwing or standing to the ground. There are basically four types of transitions, and we're going to talk about them today. I do have to my side here, there'll be a number of books that I will recommend that you buy. Some are mine, some are of very good books that I have used over the years, and then some by some friends of mine. So I will be getting to those as this email, this show develops. So let's get to the main topic: transitions. Transitioning from one thing to the next. What is a transition? A transition, at least in our world, is going from one move to another move without loss of control of your opponent. You have control of your opponent. You may not have great control of your opponent, but you are trying to be in a dominating position. And we will then move from one position to the next without losing control, and in the effort of gaining even more control, ultimately a tap out, hold them for time, whatever it may be, throw them for the full point or to finish the match, whatever it may be. So a transition is gaining control of your opponent to some degree or total degree, and then continually keeping control to the point where you transition seamlessly without losing control into another finishing technique, a finishing hold. So let's look at four basic types, and then we'll kind of run them down. By the way, getting to some books here, I will pull out the first one. I'll hold it up here over here. I talk about transitions quite a bit in my latest book, Sambo Encyclopedia. And I discuss them because in Sambo, we really think of transitions. There you go, right there. Okay, if we think of transitions as a very legitimate part of the whole fighting sport. Again, I've often said about Sambo, I like it very much because it is the total package. It is when we think of standing when we're fighting somebody, we think of getting them to the ground. If I can throw them hard and get points, the reason I want to throw them hard is to soften them up and throw them with control so I can get more points. Yeah, that's good. But then the total package is once I take them down or throw them or get them to the ground, I want to finish them off. So that's what we're talking about. So the four types of transitions, that's the very first one, from standing to groundwork. That's the most obvious one most people think about when they think of transitions. Another one is in judo, you hear this a lot, in sambo as well, standing attack to another standing attack. It could be a combination or continuation technique. So from one throw, maybe it didn't work, maybe you set them up, you faked them out, you will move on to another throw. So that's the second phase. The first one, standing to ground. The second one, standing to standing. The third one is if you're on the ground and you're attacking your opponent who is standing or partially standing. So from ground fighting against a standing opponent. So ground fighting to standing is the fourth transition, which is a very legitimate one, and we see it quite often. If you watch MMA, you'll see this often with in fact, the old timers, not necessarily real old timer, but a guy like Sakuraba or Funaki in the old Pride fights, if they were down on their back fighting or in a bottom position, they'd roll over and attempt to take their opponent down to the mat with them and then gain a submission technique or a finishing hold or ground and pound, whatever it may be, to finish them off. So the first one, again, is standing to ground. The second one is standing to standing. The third one is ground work to standing. And the fourth one is ground fighting or groundwork to another ground fighting or groundwork move. And that is a very interesting concept. We're going to spend a little time with that just a bit later, okay? But so you could be holding him and you want to finish him off. You've got him in a time hold or a hold down situation, and you want to finish him off with a submission or a ground and pound technique in MMA, whatever it may be. You could be in another controlling position. But like I said, we'll talk about that momentarily. Let's jump back to the very first of the 4 types of transitions, which are, I'm looking at my notes by the way, standing to groundwork. Okay, and there are 3 types. If you want to take them from standing to ground. Now, we all hear a lot where, most fights end up on the ground. Well, that's generally true. However, a good throw will end a fight. So that brings us to this point very quickly here, and this is how judo is so effective. A good throw, in my opinion, is the same as a submission technique. If you throw someone very hard with control and great force, you'll very likely end the fight. If you get on YouTube and watch, a lot of street fights, in many cases, somebody, whether he meant to or it just happened that way, slammed the other guy down on the concrete and the guy was finished. Okay, I've seen this personally in judo as well as sambo, but I've seen it a lot in judo where somebody threw somebody else so hard he knocked him cold. One of my very good black belts, and he was a national sambo champion, Ken Kabin, a number of years ago back in the 80s, he was competing in a judo tournament and he had a dynamite left tai otoshi. He slammed this guy so hard with that left tai otoshi, the body drop, he knocked him cold. The guy hit flat, knocked out. It was ippon, the referee called ippon, but the guy just laid there. If that had been a street fight and he'd have thrown him on concrete, the fight definitely would have been over. He was knocked out cold. So a throw can end the fight. But you can take a throw if it doesn't end the fight and you throw him partially, or you may throw him with great force. In sambo, you throw a guy with great force, but he's primarily on his backside, you probably get 4 points. The force isn't so much that we look for in scoring, but it's the control. But nonetheless, if you throw him and take him to the ground with great force or with a clean throw, and immediately follow to some hold down, you might hold him down, you might go into an arm lock, or some kind of submission move, maybe even a leg lock, something else to finish him off on the ground. So a throw, a hard throw, definitely does it. The next one is a takedown. We hear this a lot. You see it in MMA. Of course, any of you guys that have gals who have wrestled, takedown is what it is. You take them from a standing position to the mat. Now, a takedown differs from the next phase, the specific thing, which is a transition, and we'll talk about that a little more in detail momentarily. But right now, a takedown, I am taking my opponent down to the mat, and my purpose is to get him to the mat. I may not have an end result in mind necessarily. Now, I may, but often I don't. I just want to take him down. A takedown is literally what it is named. It is a takedown. So if I get him to the ground, then I may be able to get into a controlling situation, like in wrestling, get behind him get my 2 points for the ride, and that would be sufficient. Maybe from there try to break him down. But a takedown doesn't necessarily always lead directly to a submission technique or directly to a hold down for time. A takedown is that. It's just taking him to the ground, sometimes with very great control. A takedown could easily be a throw as well. A double leg takedown, morote gari, we call it in judo. Body slam him hard. You could finish the fight. You initially decided attacked with a takedown, but ended up being a beautiful throw and you slammed him. So there's a lot of leeway back and forth between throws, takedowns, transitions, but a takedown is just that. You take him to the ground. The third one, and again, that takedown is not necessarily with a plan in mind. Now, this differs from a transition, which is a specific move to get him from standing to the ground. I have in my mind where I have tied up with my opponent, I spin under him, what may look like a spinning circle throw, tomoe-nage. You see this a lot in judo and sambo. And my real goal is to actually roll him over and get him rolled over into a jujigatame. I may do another move where I do an inside leg trip, an ouchi gari, major inner reap, with a total purpose of getting between his legs, finishing in between his guard, and then moving right through to get a rolling knee bar. Uh, my goal was to transition. Another very good transition is what we call leg lacing. You might shoot in under them. If you watch MMA, you see Sakuraba or Funaki did this quite well. They would slide under their opponents, lace their legs, wrap their legs around him while he's still standing, and they're on their back now. They've slid under him, laced him up with their legs, got him down on the ground, and finished with some type of a leg or lower body submission. That could be a leg lock, excuse me, it could be a heel hook, toe hold, straight ankle lock, whatever. But the idea was to take him transition from standing to the ground with the total intent, total purpose of finishing with some type of a submission or finishing hold. So you have from a standing to ground, you have a throw, you have a takedown, or you have a transition, which you have absolutely no qualms in your mind. You want to get him down to the ground. You may get points, you may not in that transition, but the idea is to get him to the ground. This is why in Sambo we see this as a very specific phase in addition to throws and takedowns. It is the third element of our standing game in Sambo. So you will see this. Sambo wrestlers do this with some frequency. They want to get him to the ground and finish him off. Okay, so that's from standing to the ground work. Let's talk about standing to standing. You see a lot in judo, which is a lot of combination techniques, continuation techniques. Okay, you attack with one move. There are two basic types. You attack with one move, and you basically attacked him. He blocked it. He stopped it. He nullified your initial attack. Okay, so you go to plan B. You attack with something else. So I may hit with a forward throw, like a Seoinage. He blocks and he hops around. I may step in deeper and hit between his legs with a Ko Uchigaki or Ko Uchigari Makakomi, minor inner reap, minor inner hook inside your leg trip. So that's a clear case where of the first example of a transition in standing to standing would be your opponent blocks your initial attack. The second is often seen in judo as well, and you'll see it in other sambo, certainly in any other sport that has good throwing techniques and takedown techniques. You will see your opponent fake. I will fake my opponent out and make him react in such a way that I will catch him with a second or even third move. Okay, I know what I've taught for years is what I call a double take. You hit basically the same move twice in a row, but you elicit a response. So I may hit with my stand-up Seoinage shoulder throw, and he hops around. I want him to hop around, and I jump in deeper with a knee drop Seoinage where I'm deep between his legs, and I slam him for a very hardy pawn and get him to the ground. So that is a second type of a transition from in standing to standing. So I will attack. I will elicit a response of some type. I may just like fake a foot sweep, fake a technique, and get him to respond, and then hit with another technique. So you see that often, and with great results. And often that's part of the moving and setting a guy up and controlling his balance and everything else. So it truly is an art and a science in and of itself. So the second phase then is standing to standing, and it's the first one will be he negates or stops your throw, and then you have to go to a plan B. Then it's your backup is to hit him with a second move, whatever it may be. And the other version is the other type of a standing to standing transition is I basically fake him out with a move. I make him elicit some type of response that I want, and then I hit him with that second or even third move. It may even link into several, two or three things. Maybe the third throw down the way. Excuse me, I'm going to get a drink here of my iced tea to clear the throat. So that's the second one. First one, standing to groundwork. Second one, standing to standing. The third one, you don't see as much in a lot of sports, but it's there, and it should be there more often actually, is ground fighting, groundwork against a standing opponent. So I might be down. He might have knocked me down for some reason. You see this in MMA actually more than most any other fighting sports, I believe. And I'm down. And he's standing. Okay. So now it's my job to get him down to my level. A good way might be, he's knocked me down. I'm sitting on my buttocks in a guard position. I scoot under him. Even while I'm on the ground, he's standing. I scoot under him, lace my legs, wrap my legs around him, wrap him up very tight, boom, take him right down to the ground, finish him off with some type of a lower body submission. I might be a BJJ guy, and I'm down, and my opponent is standing, and I want to be on my buttocks, moving around underneath him, so I can roll under him, scoop, grab a leg, sweep him, but take him from a standing position to a bottom position. So that's, you see that with some frequency in MMA. You'll see it in BJJ. You may see it in Sambo to some degree. If I've been knocked down, I'm going to try to squirrel under you, scramble under you to get you down, okay? To specifically get you from a standing to a ground position. So I'm on the bottom for some reason in a downed position, okay? It's not as common as the other three types of transitions, but it is there. It is viable and it is effective. A very good one that we use in Sambo, I know I'm talking a lot about Sambo, but it does relate a lot to transitions, so bear with me, is if I've been down for whatever reason, I may try to do what's, a scissors type throw, a kane basami, a crab leg scissors, where I try to reach one leg behind him, one leg forward, take him down to his back or to his front, and finish with a submission. So I may try to get to his side and scissor him with my legs against his legs, take him down. That's a common ground fighting to standing transition. So there you have the third one of the four. The fourth one, we're going to spend a bit of time with here because we all do it, and some do it more often than others. And if you like ground fighting the way I do, and I think a lot of you do, is we see this a lot. So it's ground fighting or groundwork to another groundwork or ground fighting situation. So it's ground to ground. And they're basically, I'm looking at my notes here, I've always thought there were four types. I'll just read them off. We'll talk about it. First one is you are controlling the position, and then you move to a finishing move or a submission technique or another hold. So I may get my opponent down in a leg press position or a side control position. I don't necessarily have him in a hold yet, but I am controlling his movement with this leg press or side control, something sitting on his head, sitting shoulder sit, we often call it a welcome mat. And then I finish off with something else. So it's a controlling position to further control to a submission or to a hold. So controlling position to a submission, let's say. The second one would be a time hold or a pin or a hold down to a submission technique or a finishing hold. It might be a ground and pound. It might be another even hold down. I may switch from one pin to another, say in a judo sense. I feel that he's getting away from me. I'll switch from a keisagatame, switch over to maybe a munegatame, a shoulder, or maybe a chest hold, side four corner lock, whatever it may be. So the second one is a time hold. I'm holding him for time. Again, I credit Gene LeBell with, to my knowledge, inventing that name. I first saw that back when I read Gene's book in 1966, The Handbook of Judo. I think it was published in 62, but I saw it in 66 as a teenager, and that introduced the time hold to me. You're holding your opponent, controlling him for time. Then you're finishing him off with a submission technique. Or you could hold them off with another hold down, say in judo where you would win with a hold down for an osaikomi. You could do that too. But a time hold to another finishing hold. So that's the second one. The third one is you have less control of your opponent, but you still have some control. You're breaking him down, turning him over onto his back, or breaking him down onto his front from a stable to an unstable position, and then finishing him off. So a breakdown, not necessarily always a turnover. I hear a lot in judo and somewhat in sambo. I think in BJJ and some of the other fighting sports, they'll call them turnovers, where you turn your opponent over from his front to his back. That's a good name, turnover, but it doesn't imply the real aggressive behavior that you have to put over your opponent. Yes, you are turning him over. But a breakdown is more than that. You are breaking him down from a stable to an unstable position. And I know when I wrote the rules of freestyle judo, I didn't call them turnovers. We give a point for a breakdown, not a turnover, a point for a breakdown. And it's taking from a stable to an unstable position. He might be on his knees. I might take him from that position, getting him onto his back, okay, or onto his side primarily, okay. Or that's a freestyle judo. But say in a grappling sense, I might be hooked up on him in a rodeo ride or a rear mount position where I got my hooks in, and he's on all fours or elbows and knees, and he's quite stable at that point. He's fighting me. Well, I will flatten him out onto his belly, drive him forward, extend him, and where he's flat on his face, which is a very bad position for your opponent to be in, and I recommend doing it to him every chance you get. Like life sucks when you're on the bottom and your face is eating the mat. That's a bad place for you to be. You want to make your opponent down there as often as you can. So another breakdown will be flattening him out, extending it, and then working your choke in or arm lock or maybe leg lock, whatever it may be. So you finish him off from a stable to an unstable position, and then finish him off. It may even, you may break him down, and in an MMA fight, you can't get a submission hold. He's too slick. He's too sweaty. So you just have to end up with ground, or that may be your intention, to ground and pound and beat the snot out of him to where he gives up or the referee stops the fight. So the third of the ground fighting scenarios is a breakdown to a finishing hold or finishing technique, submission technique, whatever it may be. The fourth one is you are switching from one submission or finishing hold, and your opponent may escape, or you may decide that you just don't have enough control at that point. You will shift to another finishing hold or submission technique. So it's submission technique to a second submission technique, or if necessary, a third or fourth, whatever it may be. Usually you'll just get probably just the second one. This is the concept of chain fighting or chain wrestling, linking one thing to another. So it's a submission switching to a second submission. So to recap, the fourth of the types of basic types of transitions, ground fighting to ground fighting, the first one is you're controlling the position to a finishing move or submission technique. So you control leg press to a jujigatami. Clear example. One of our favorites, and certainly in our club, we try to get him where we're in a leg press position. He's on his back. I've got my legs across him. I'm sitting up, and I pry or lever his arm free and get into the jujigatami, okay? Or if he somehow fights out of that, I will switch to something else. But so from a controlling position to a submission, okay? The second one would be a time hold, a hold down, a pin, osaikomi, immobilize him in a time hold situation, and you have time to beat him, to eventually apply that submission technique. One of my great athletes who I trained and was a very good judo submission grappler, but he's also world sambo champion, world open sambo champion back quite a number of years ago, Chris Hegedon. And Chris said he would like to control them to the point where he felt they were leaking oil, like he was making them leak oil, just like a car leaking oil. If a car leaks out enough oil, it will break down. And Chris said I would grind him and grind him and grind him, and I would just keep controlling him from one controlling position to another, from one time hold to another, to where I just took everything out of it. Make it very unpleasant, make it painful. As another one of my great athletes, Sean Watson, said, park him there until he quits. Either he'll quit from tapping out from the pressure that you've applied with him with the hold itself, with the submission, from making a hold down a submission technique, just make it so painful or unbearable to squeeze it out of him, or weaken him to the point where you can move on to a submission technique. Okay, so that's the second one. First one, controlling position to finishing, then time hold to finishing technique or submission. So the third one, breakdown to finishing hold. You break him down, forearm near leg. He may be belly down, and in a judo sense, you want to grab his gi, flip him over onto the back, turn him onto his back, what we call a judo stack him back onto his back, and then apply the pin. Or you may have in a position where you are riding him, you gut wrench him, whip him over onto his back. You can apply a real nice hold from there, say a hip hold or a hip pin, and then work into a a leg lock or arm lock from that position. So you have broken him down. You have taken him from a stable to an unstable position, either on elbows and knees, parterre, where he's on hands and knees, or he may be high up, like squatting even, and high with his butt up in the air on feet and knees, and he's still on the ground, but you take him from a stable to an unstable position. So that's the third one, breakdown to a submission hold or finishing hold. And the last one of the four, ground fighting to ground fighting, is switch from one submission technique to another one, a second one or a third one is necessary. If he escapes the first one, have plan B in mind. Okay, a great backup to your Jujigatami could be switching over immediately if he's fighting on his back, like in a leg press position, and you've got him and he's just too hard to lever that arm free or pry that arm free. Switch immediately over to some kind of a bent compression arm lock, okay, to finish him off. Or you may try a specific move like a Udagarami bent arm lock, arm entanglement, and somehow he may roll over or he gets away momentarily. He's onto his front now. You've got his back. You can apply a nice rear naked choke, Hadaka Jime, or some other type of choke. So you are going from one submission technique to the second one or a third one. So that's what transitions are. You transition from one position to another with the idea of without losing control of your opponent. Now, we also have to discuss, it doesn't always work the way we want it to. We may be working transitions and he may get away momentarily. We have to end up in a scramble. There may be that little middle part in there where a scramble situation is, where he is your opponent and you are now kind of on even terms again. So you did have a controlling position. He fought his way out of it, or you lost control, and now you're in a scramble again. Now, again, your job, and if you've seen the previous video, now we're getting to Kobuichi world. Kobuichi, linking one thing to the next, taking offense, defense, offense, one continuous phase of attacking. You may have to go on defense a bit of time. You may have to go neutral, but you want to get back in control of your opponent. So that's where everything, grappling and fighting leads. It's a synergistic thing. One thing literally leads to another. Okay, so you may have that time where you have a control of them. You want to transition without losing control, but something goes wrong. You lose control. You've got to immediately take control back. Okay, so that's your plan of attack. So that's what transitions are. And think of these as a specific phase of grappling. I know that some of you may not have thought a lot about, you think about one phase of transitions, but think about the four areas of transitions we've covered in this video today. And they all work together. Think of fighting as a total package. In judo, I know we throw someone and it could end ippon, which it should. A lot of fights do end when you slam a guy on the ground. It is a submission technique. He's given up. You've knocked him cold, whatever. But the fight doesn't always end that way. So you have to have a transition from your throw to the ground. Okay. So judo guys, think about, don't just ending the match with an ippon. Think about that. And what I always told my kids when I coached them, it's an insurance policy. Transition to the ground. So even if you think you've thrown him for an ippon, judo people, still follow through to the ground. After you throw him, go immediately to the ground technique. Okay. I can remember back when knee drop seoinage was just coming into its own in the world of judo. Prior to the late 1960s, early 1970s, knee drop seoinage, any knee drop type of attack, was really looked down upon in the sport of judo. It really was. And I liked it. I was a big, tall guy, and I found I could get under him quite well. And even if I wasn't a big, tall guy, there were a lot of people who did it quite well. And for a long time, you couldn't buy any ippon with a knee drop seoinage. You may throw him flat on his back with total control and great force, and you couldn't get more than maybe a wazari. And in that case, you had to have your backup. You had to have your insurance policy from that knee drop seoinage, and had to be some type of a ground game. Could be immediately transition right to a hold down, and it could be from that transition from that hold down into some type of submission, or you might go right into a Jujigatami. Okay, my wife had a very good knee drop seoinage. She would throw them. If she couldn't immediately go into the osaikome or holding technique, she would immediately go into a Jujigatami. Her good friend Anne Maria DeMars had the same thing. She threw, I've seen it personally, a lot of people with a D-drop Seoinage into a Jujigatami crossbody arm lock. Likewise, could be Kouchigari, Kouchigaki, minor inner hook, Kouchi Makakomi, where it's an inside leg trip, bam, down they go. You immediately follow through to some type of a hold, get past their guard, their leg, and pin them. Go right into a submission. So that's what we're saying, judo people. Don't just think of ending the fight with a throw. Have that insurance policy. That's what transitions are. Again, from a Sambo perspective, we look at it as a total package. Now, I talked about earlier in the video about some other books I would like you to see. Let's take a look at some of these books right now that really emphasize great transitions, and good ground fighting in general, but great transitions. I will reach here, and can you see it here? I'll get over here. A great book, Winning on the Ground. Hey, guess what? By Anne Maria DeMars and James Pedro Sr., two friends of mine who did a great job. There's Ronda Rousey on the cover. I recommend this book. It's a good book. It is both Anne Maria and Jimmy Pedro Sr. are experts in Newaza ground fighting. They really are. And no matter what fighting sport you in, judo is their background. There you go without the glare. Judo is their background. I would recommend this book highly. Okay, so Winning on the Ground. All right, put that aside. Another book on good transitions, well before its time, is one of the greats of all time. There, can I get it without? Yeah, Vital Judo. Do you see that, everybody? By Sao Kano, a true judo master. Grappling techniques. The first one was throwing techniques. This book, I can't remember when it came out. 70s or 80s, early 70s sometime, I believe. Anyway, it was a groundbreaker. It was, to my knowledge, and I have a lot of books, and I read a lot of books, it showed, when we talked about Vital Judo, the dynamic movement of judo. It didn't just isolate things, one thing after another. This blended everything. This book was the original book on transitions, in my opinion. So if you can get a copy of this book, I have one of the original, and you can see it's well worn. And anybody who gets my books, unfortunately, I'm one of those guys that writes in them, writes all kinds of side notes in them, and you can see this has been well worn. I would recommend this book. Okay. A couple of more. One that John Saylor and I wrote, Vital Jiu-Jitsu. We came out with this early, I think in March or May of 2015. This is John and mine's latest book. It is our approach to Shingitai training and grappling. This book, volume 1, is about grappling. And that's what we emphasize. John and I both are very big on transitioning from one move to the other, and that's what this book details quite a bit. So Vital Jiu-Jitsu. This one you can get at our web store, welcomematstore.com, and you can get it through John Saylor, johnsaylorsja.com, and you can get this through, like I said, those two sources there. I think it's on eBay as well. I think we've got a thing on it with eBay as well if you want to. So there you have it. Okay, Vital Jiu-Jitsu. There's another one. Another good one by Kashiwazaki, Attacking Judo. I don't know if it's in print anymore. I highly recommend it. Of course, it has standing work too, but it also has a lot of standing to standing. Attacking Judo. Kashiwazaki was a true master of judo, world Sambo, world judo champion. He was, in my opinion, one of the most complete grapplers who ever lived. And his book, Attacking Judo, is excellent. So I would highly recommend this book if you can get it. I think it is out of print, but I'm not sure. If not, it's worth the money. It's worth having. Not a big book, but it is certainly a great book. Okay. Just a few more here. Gene LeBell, one of the greats in catch wrestling and pro wrestling, and certainly a great judo man himself, Judo Gene LeBell. He's printed out several editions of his Grappling World book. I would highly recommend this book. It is a good book. It's a big book. It is literally an encyclopedia of finishing holds. And there are some things in this that are transitions from one to the next, but a lot of them he shows how to finish. Anyway, I think every bookshelf should have this book on it, Grappling, and I think you should read it. It's I've had several copies of this book. It's one of those books, if you loan to somebody, you probably won't get it back. So I finally learned, don't loan it out. Although I have given some copies away to some of my athletes, and they deserving guys, and they sure get a lot out of it. So Grappling World by Gene LeBell, highly recommend it. Just a couple more, shameless plug for myself. There you go, Ground Fighting Pins and Breakdowns, published by Turtle. By the way, Sambo Encyclopedia is also published by Turtle Press. You can get this book, Ground Fighting Pins and Breakdowns. I've got a little glare in here today. I'm sorry, everybody. I would recommend this book. That's what this is about. Breakdowns, transitioning from a stable to an unstable position for your opponent, getting them down from stable to unstable, and finishing them off with a generally hold down. We are finishing them off with time holds in this book. It's a pretty good sized book. This, by the way, was also translated to Portuguese for the Brazilian market, so I guess we've been selling some copies down there. This has been a good seller for me, so if you want a book on breakdowns, I highly recommend this book. Okay, and again, shameless plug, but I'm proud of it. It's one of my early books, and it's a good book. Okay, and last for this one, if you have not got my book, Winning on the Mat, a lot of you in the Kaizen program have. I recommend it highly. There we go. Winning on the Mat. We do a lot of transitions. I talk about them in the book, what transitions are, the difference between a throw and a takedown and transitions. That's what good, effective judo is. I'll put this back over here. That's what good, effective judo is. It's transitioning from one thing to the next, just like good, effective sambo. Good, effective any type of fighting is transitioning from one move to the next. So that being said, we spent about 36, 37 minutes of me yapping here about transitions. It is a subject worthy of some discussion at this length. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And I hope you have a takeaway from this as let's take a really good look at what transitions are and how you can use them more effectively in whatever fighting sport or whatever grappling sport you do. Okay, so that's it on transitions, and I'll be ready to click out here. And if you do have any questions about it, again, email me at stevescottjudo@yahoo.com. If you are seeing this and you have not yet got into our Kaizen program, it is free, and we certainly encourage you to do this. I will also be using a lot of these videotapes, these videos, not a tape, I'm showing my age, a lot of these videos in probably our AAU coach education program at some point in the future, and certainly our Welcome Mat coaching program here in the Kansas City area for our Welcome Mat coaches. So these are all things that if you want to get more coach education, this is the type of thing you want to study. So again, thanks everybody, and that's it for transitions. I will see you on another video. And by the way, real quick, go to our YouTube channels, Welcome Mat Steve Scott. It's our YouTube channel. This will be posted on there at some point in the future, but we do have lots of videos there and a lot of techniques. Again, a lot of transition work, and I hope you get something out of that as well. It's a great tool for studying. So thanks a lot.